Hello everyone, in this video we're going to talk about how we can find the slope of a line. So just the definition, the slope, which is represented by the variable m, the slope of a line is the value of the change in y, which we call the rise, so up or down, to the change in x, which we call the run, left and right, between any 2 points, x sub 1, y sub 1, or just the x and y coordinates of one point, and x sub 2, y sub 2. That's the x and y coordinate of the second point or the other point. I use the word sub because we're talking about a subscript, which is where we have that little number at the bottom, right? A lot of times we're familiar with a superscript, which is an exponent, right? But in this case, it's called a subscript. So it's just an identifier. It's just telling us the x coordinate from point 1, y coordinate from point 1, x coordinate from point 2, or y coordinate from point 2. And it doesn't matter which point you say is point 1 or point 2, because the slope's going to be the same no matter whether you go this direction or this direction. It doesn't matter, okay? The slope of a line is simply just the measure of the steepness of a line. So the steeper the line, the bigger the slope should be, or the larger it should be, right? Now, when I say bigger or larger, think about the absolute value of the slope, right? Because negative numbers are smaller than positive numbers, right? But the steepness could be uphill or downhill, depending on if my slope is positive or negative. And we're going to see the 4 types of slope here in just a minute. So now here in yellow on the left, we see 3 different ways we could find or represent slope. So slope is the variable m, right? M is equal to rise over run, right? So if I have this point here and this point here, I just want to go from one point to the other by doing a rise. So I'm going to go down and then I'm going to run. Okay, so I would just count those units to figure out what my slope is. Or we could go up to rise and then right to run. Okay, either way, we will find what our slope is. Okay. When we are doing that, we're finding the change, right? We saw that up here, the change in y divided by the change in x. Well, change is subtraction, right? So we could think, okay, the difference of my y values, y2 minus y1, divided by the difference of my x values, x2 minus x1, all right? Now, we talked about there's 4 types of slope, so that's on the screen now. So if we're going uphill from left to right, we would call that positive slope. Think about in real life walking uphill, right? That's a positive slope. Negative slope would be going downhill, right? So, okay, now think we're going downhill, walking, that's a negative slope. Horizontal line, we mentioned this in a previous video when I talked about HOI and VUX, right? HOI stands for horizontal line, 0 slope, y equals a number. So if I have a horizontal line, that means the slope is 0. So think about just walking on a flat surface, right? It's easy, it doesn't take much energy, you don't have to think about it much because there's no slope, right? The slope is 0. The last one is undefined, kind of hard to understand, but just think about, is it possible to walk either up or down in a perfectly vertical slope, right? No, okay, that's hard to describe, even to think about what that would be like, right? So we call it undefined, just can't find it, okay? All right, so let's look at an example where we actually find the slope of these 4 different types, right? So for number 1, we see we have a line that's going downhill from left to right, so I know that my slope is going to be negative. So now I'm just going to start at, we call this point 1 and this point 2. I'm going to do my rise, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 units. And then 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to call this -6 because we went down 6. And then we went right 3, so it would be positive 3. Okay? So my slope here, we have -6 over 3. And when we have slope, we can reduce the slope. So we can just say this one would be -2 because we know that -6 divided by 3 is -2, right? Okay, number 2 should be a positive slope because you see how we're going uphill from left to right. So I'm going to go up 1, 2, and then right 1, 2, 3, 4. So now both of those were positive numbers, so that's 2 over 4. And just like we did on number 1, we can reduce the slope by saying that is 1 over 2 or 1/2. Okay, so we said the slope is the measure of the steepness of the line. So notice how on number 1, that line is a lot steeper than the line on number 2 because the slope was larger. If we think about the absolute value of the slope, right? For number 1, the slope was -2. So if we think about 2 there, 2 is a bigger number than 1/2, which is what we had on number 2, right? So the steepness of the line on number 1, we should expect to be more steep than the steepness on number 2, okay? All right, now number 3. If we notice on number 3, okay, we have a horizontal line. So if we try to think about rise over run, right, let's pick a couple points. Let's say we have this point here and this point here, okay? Well, do we rise at all? No, right? We don't go up or down to get to the other point, right? It's straight across. So if my rise is in my numerator, we would say 0, right? And honestly, let's say what we're running here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? So 0 over 5. And honestly, your denominator could have been anything you want besides 0 to describe your run there. And all of that is just going to give you an answer of 0. The slope is 0, right? Because 0 over 5, 0 over 4, 0 over 3, whatever we want it to be besides 0 over 0, that's still going to result in a 0 slope, right? Which is like what we talked about earlier with HOI, horizontal line, 0 slope, y equals a number. So even if I wanted to write the equation for this line, I could say, okay, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So this must be an equation of y equals 4, right? Okay. And number 4, right? Kind of the same idea. Let's start with our rise. Well, let's just pick a couple points here. Let's say these two, right? Well, we're rising 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, but are we running at all? Do I go left or right to line up with the other point? No, we don't, right? So we would have to put 0 in the denominator. Well, when we do that, we are now dividing by 0, which in math cannot happen. It gives us an undefined result. If you have a calculator and you type it in, 5 divided by 0, it's going to give you an error message, okay? So the reason that is because if we think about a fraction, right, it's like part of a whole. The numerator is the part, the denominator is the whole. So we're saying we have 5 parts, but we had 0 to begin with. So it just doesn't make sense logically, right? So in this case, we would actually say that the slope is undefined, right? We write out the word undefined, and that would be our slope, okay? Now for this one, it is a vertical line, right? Vux, vertical line, undefined slope. So if I were to write the equation of the line, we know it should be x equals something. X equals, and it goes through -1, -2, -3. So we would say x equals -3 if we wanted to write the equation of the line, right? So the slope is undefined, the equation of the line is -3, okay? So that's a little bit about how to find the slope of a line.